I never thought I'd be sitting here pouring my guts out on a damn post, but here I am. I guess I need to get this off my chest. It all started about a week ago when I finally stumbled on the truth I'd been ignoring for years. We've been together for 6 years. Nice house, decent jobs, the whole American dream. I thought she was the one, or at least I did until I found the texts. It was late at night and I was supposed to be asleep. Instead, I was scrolling through her phone, something I'd never done before, but I was suspicious. She'd been acting weird lately, secretive, distracted, always with the phone glued to her hand. What I saw made my stomach drop. There was a string of messages between her and her boss, Mark, that made it clear they'd been sleeping together. Not just once, multiple times. The night before our wedding, no less. I remember feeling numb, like someone had punched me in the gut and twisted the knife slowly. The messages weren't just flirty banter. They were detailed, intimate, talking about last night, how they'd met up after her shift, how it felt so good to finally let go. I could see her words, her emojis, her laugh, everything laid bare on that tiny screen. Her hand had even typed, "Can't wait to see you again," and I'd bet my life she meant Mark. My palms went cold, my breath hitched, and my head spun. I felt like I was about to vomit, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I had physical evidence, screenshots saved on my phone just in case. I looked at them for what felt like hours, unable to believe what I was seeing. My wife, my partner, the woman I trusted with everything, had been lying to my face for years. I kept asking myself, what else has she been hiding? I knew this wasn't just about one night or one affair. It was about betrayal, an entire lifetime of secrets she'd kept locked behind that fake smile. My fingers trembled as I clutched her phone, the weight of it pressing down on my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment I saw those texts, the sick feeling in my stomach, the pounding in my head. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating on him before the wedding. It all felt surreal, like I was watching some twisted movie, but it was real, and I knew I couldn't just ignore it anymore. Next morning, I woke up early trying to process what I'd found. I decided I needed to confront her. I called her, told her I wanted to talk. She sounded nervous, trying to pretend everything was fine. She kept asking what was wrong, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a straight answer. Instead, I told her I knew everything, that I had seen the messages. Her face went pale. She stammered, "It's not what it looks like," but I didn't buy it for a second. My stomach clenched. I felt a rush of anger, a mix of heartbreak and fury. Why lie for so long? Why string me along? I could feel my fists tighten as I looked her in the eyes and said, "You lied to me for years. All those times you told me you loved me, you were secretly sleeping with your boss." She looked like she wanted to disappear into thin air. "Please, it was a mistake," she whispered, voice trembling. I was too pissed off to hold back. "A mistake? That's all you've got? You've been sneaking around hiding this from me and you call it a mistake?" Her excuses sounded hollow. I saw her eyes dart around, looking for a way out, but I was done. That's when I knew I had to do something, not just to get revenge, but to reclaim my dignity. I had been naive for so long, but I wasn't going to let her keep lying to my face. I told her I needed space, that I'd think about everything. As I walked out of that house, I felt a cold emptiness settle over me. I'd uncovered the biggest secret of my life, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The thing is, I've always believed in getting even. If she thought she could betray me, then she was in for a rude awakening. I wasn't just going to walk away. I had a plan, one that would hit her where it hurt the most. But I had to figure out the details first. So here I am, typing this out, trying to make sense of what happens next. I know I need to act, but part of me still feels numb. I've got her phone, her secrets, and a mind full of plans. The question is, what comes after I set everything in motion? Next part. I've spent the last few days turning everything over in my head. I keep waking up with that sick feeling in my stomach, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your palms sweat. I know she lied, she betrayed me, and I have to do something about it. Not just for me, but to send a message. She can't keep getting away with this kind of betrayal. I started planning my revenge carefully. I wasn't going to do something reckless or impulsive. No, I was going to be methodical, cold even. I wanted her to feel the sting, to understand that lying and cheating come with consequences, and I was about to deliver those consequences myself. First, I needed leverage. I went through her phone again, more thoroughly this time. I found a few more messages, some pictures she didn't realize I'd seen. Nothing explicit, thank God, but enough to remind me of what I'd uncovered. I also found out where Mark worked, what hours. She'd been seeing him, and I memorized the details. I was gathering every piece of dirt I could find. Then I decided I'd need physical evidence, just in case she tried to deny anything later. I took photos of the messages on her phone, saved them securely, and even managed to get a copy of some of her bank statements showing payments made to Mark for consulting, or some bullshit like that. She thought she was so clever, hiding her tracks, but I was catching her every move. One afternoon, I went to a local store and bought a cheap but convincing recording device. I wanted to record her conversations, her explanations, anything that could serve as proof if she tried to lie her way out. I knew it was a little sneaky, maybe even borderline obsessive, but I didn't care. I needed her to know I was serious. She'd fucked up, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. That night, I set everything up in my house. I placed the recorder in the living room, hid my phone to record her when she came home, and prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. I rehearsed what I'd say in my head, but honestly I was too furious to have a script. All I knew was I wasn't going to let her weasel her way out of this. When she finally came home, I was already waiting. She looked tense, avoiding my eyes, her hands trembling slightly. I could see all the stress lines on her face, the guilt maybe, or just the fear of what was coming. So I said, voice steady but cold, "You told me it was just a one-time mistake, huh?" Her eyes darted and she swallowed hard. I I didn't mean for it to happen. I was drunk or stressed. It meant nothing. I shook my head slowly, feeling the anger bubble up. It meant nothing. You lied to me about everything for years. You slept with your boss the night before my wedding, and now you're telling me it meant nothing. She looked like she was about to cry, but I wasn't going to let her do that, not this time. I was done with her excuses, done with her lies. I told her I had proof, screenshots, bank statements, recordings. She froze for a second, then tried to deny everything. I pressed play on the recorder and her voice came through, nervous and shaky. "Look at this," I said, holding up her phone. "All the evidence. I want to know what the hell was going on." She broke down then, finally cracking under the pressure. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain herself, but I wasn't interested in her excuses. I was already planning my next move. I knew I had to be careful, precise. I wasn't about to just storm out and leave it at that. No, I wanted her to feel the full weight of what she'd done. That's when I told her I'd had enough. I told her I'd been planning something that would make her regret every lie, every betrayal. She looked terrified, pleading, but it didn't matter anymore. I'd made up my mind. I was done being the naive guy who trusted her blindly. The moment I saw her crumbling, I knew I was close. I needed to finish what I started. I wanted her to see that cheating, lying would come back to bite her hard. And I'd be the one to do it. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I told her I'd give her one last chance to come clean, to tell me everything she'd hidden, but I knew she wouldn't. That's when I revealed my plan, something that would hit her where it mattered most. She was going to regret ever crossing me. The look on her face when I told her was priceless. Shock, anger, a flicker of fear. I could see it all in her eyes. She thought she'd played me for years, but she hadn't seen the storm coming. I walked out that night knowing I had everything I needed. The pieces were in place. I was about to turn her world upside down. And the best part, she wouldn't see it coming. Next part. The plan I had in mind was simple but brutal, precise, almost clinical. I wanted her to feel the exact pain of betrayal, to understand that her lies had consequences far beyond what she imagined. I wasn't just going to confront her once. No, I wanted to make her sweat, to make her realize that trust, once broken, doesn't just come back overnight. I spent the next couple of days setting everything in motion. I knew her routine, her habits, her weak spots. I researched Mark's schedule, figured out where he worked, what his home looked like. I even found out about some of her other contacts, people she'd been close with, friends she might turn to for support. I wanted to cover all angles. My first move was to make her realize she wasn't as clever as she thought. I sent a message to her boss, an anonymous message, just a simple confession of her affair, pointing out that I had proof. I didn't want to give her a chance to deny everything. I wanted Mark to see that I was aware of everything, that I knew what was going on behind his back. Next, I devised a way to expose her to her friends and family. I knew she'd spin stories, try to save face, but I wanted her to understand that her reputation was already crumbling. I made a fake social media account, enough to post some of the screenshots I'd taken. Nothing explicit, just enough to leave people suspicious. I also crafted a message, something succinct but damning. For everyone who thinks they know someone, remember that sometimes the truth is hiding in plain sight. Trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. I posted it late one evening, then sat back and watched as the ripple spread. Her phone started blowing up with calls and messages. I could hear her packing around, panicked, trying to figure out what was happening. She knew I was behind it, no question. That night I went straight to her, the evidence flashing in my mind. I told her everything I'd done, how I'd sent that message, how I'd exposed her to the world. Her face went white, her hands trembling. She looked like a trapped animal. "Why are you doing this?" she begged, voice cracking. "Please, it was just a mistake. I didn't bother hiding my hostility." "A mistake? You call cheating on me with your boss a mistake? You lied for years, played the perfect wife, and now you want mercy." She sank to her knees, tears streaming, begging for forgiveness. But I felt nothing but cold rage. I wanted her to understand that she couldn't just manipulate her way out of this. Not anymore. That's when I told her I had one last thing planned, something that would hit her where it hurt the most. I had discovered her secret bank account, set up by her to hide her secret life. I had access now. Money she'd been funneling to her side, money I could take away. I told her I'd freeze those accounts, cut her off financially, and make her realize that her lies had real consequences. Her eyes widened in horror. "You wouldn't do that," she whispered. "Oh, I will," I said, voice low and steady. "You've been lying to me for years. I want to see how you like being powerless, how it feels when everything you've built comes crashing down. Because you betrayed me, and I'm going to make sure you pay." That night I pulled the trigger on my plan. I accessed the bank accounts, froze her cards, and turned off her access to her money. I knew she'd panic, but I also knew she'd never see it coming. I wanted her to feel helpless, to understand that her actions had consequences, that her lies weren't just words, they affected real lives. The next morning she confronted me, furious. "You're destroying everything." "Exactly," I cut her off, voice rising. "You've been destroying us for years, hiding things, cheating, lying. Now I get to push back. You want to play the victim, fine, but I'm the one in control now." Her face twisted with anger and despair. She spat out, "You're overreacting. This is all just because you found out." "No," I said, staring her down. "This is about the fact that I finally found out the truth, and I'm making damn sure you understand what betrayal costs." I walked away then, leaving her standing there, furious and defeated. I knew I'd taken her power away, her money, her reputation, her sense of control. I felt a strange mixture of relief and rage, knowing I was finally taking back what was mine, but I also knew this was just the beginning. The fallout was already happening, and I had to brace for what was coming next. The question was, how far was she willing to go to save herself? I had my plan, but I also knew she would fight dirty. Still, I was ready. Next part. By the time the morning rolled around, her world was already starting to crumble. I could hear her packing upstairs, her muffled curses and frantic movements telling me she was trying to figure out her next move. I stayed downstairs, calm but alert, knowing I'd set the gears in motion and now just had to wait for the inevitable fallout. I poured myself a coffee, feeling the cold steel of my resolve settle around me. Watching her scramble was oddly satisfying, but I knew better than to get complacent. She'd be dangerous now, desperate, cornered, and probably furious. I had to be ready for anything. It was around 9 a.m. when she finally stormed down the stairs, her face flushed with rage and her eyes blazing with fury. She looked like she could spit fire. She was furious, screaming, "You think you've won? This isn't over, you're just making things worse." I looked at her, steady and unshaken. "You lied to me for years. You betrayed me when I trusted you the most. I don't think I need to make it worse. You already did that yourself." She stormed toward me, voice trembling with rage. "You're just jealous. You're insecure. You're trying to control me." No, I interrupted, voice cold. I'm trying to protect myself from the person I thought I knew, but I see now I did. Know you at all. Her fists clenched and she snapped. You want to punish me? Fine, but this isn't how real women behave. You're just insecure, afraid of losing me. Losing you? I scoffed. You lost me the moment you decided to hide your entire life from me. I was your husband, not some idiot to be played with, and now I'm fixing that. She took a step closer, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You're just angry because I don't want to be your puppet, your possession. You can't control me, and that's what's really eating you up inside. I straightened up, feeling that familiar flicker of anger ignite inside me. Control you? No, but I do expect honesty. I deserve that much, and I sure as hell don't deserve to be lied to for years. You've made your choice, now I'm making mine. That's when I dropped the bomb I'd been saving. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. I handed it to her silently. Open that. She hesitated, then snatched it, tearing open the seal. Her eyes widened as she saw what was inside: documents, proof of her secret account, the copies of all the financial transactions she'd hidden, the bank statements, the wire transfers, all in black and white. What is this? She demanded, voice trembling. The proof I needed, I said flatly. Your secret stash, your hidden money, your escape plan. I've already frozen everything. You're not going anywhere, not without facing what you did. Her knees buckled slightly and she pressed her hands against her face. You're ruining everything, she muttered. No, I said quietly. You did that all by yourself. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Her voice cracked as she looked at me, tears beginning to form. Please don't do this. We can fix it. I can. You can't fix this, I cut her off sharply. You lied about everything. You betrayed me, and now you're going to pay. I've set the stage. Everything's in motion, and I won't stop until you understand what real consequences mean. She stared at the documents for a long moment, then looked up at me, her face a mask of shock, anger, and despair. You're just revenge hungry. You want to destroy me because I hurt you. No. I said, voice firm. I want you to understand the pain you've caused. If you think you can cheat and lie your way out of this, you're dead wrong. She finally broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably. I watched her, feeling that strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd taken away her secrets, her money, her power, everything she'd tried to hide. But what I really wanted was to see her realize that she'd lost everything that mattered. I left her crying there, clutching that envelope, knowing that the next move was hers. I'd done my part. Now it was up to her how deep she wanted this to go. As I walked out the door, I kept one thing in mind. I'd never let her play me again, and she'd remember this day for the rest of her life. Next part. The fallout hit harder than I expected. I thought the initial shock would be enough to break her, to make her realize she'd gone too far. But she's stubborn and she's angry, just as much as she's hurt. The first few days after I handed over the evidence, I watched her spiral. She'd lock herself in her room, cry, scream, then try to spin stories to her friends, trying to salvage what little dignity she had left. I stayed quiet, letting her burn herself out. Every time she looked at me with that mixture of contempt and desperation, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. She thought she could keep me under her thumb, that her lies would protect her, but I'd already taken away her ability to manipulate me. The truth was out there now, and she couldn't deny it anymore. Meanwhile, I kept my distance. I didn't want to escalate things further, but I was ready for whatever she threw at me. I knew her pride was wounded, and I wasn't about to let her forget it. I also knew that she'd try to retaliate, probably by playing the victim or trying to guilt me into backing down. But I was done being the fool. One evening, she finally confronted me in the living room, her eyes blazing with fury. You think you've won. You think I'm just going to roll over and accept this. I looked at her, calm but firm. I haven't won anything. I just finally learned the truth. You lied, you cheated, and now you're trying to pretend it didn't happen. She clenched her fists, voice trembling. You're just angry, you're insecure, don't make me the villain here. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm not insecure, I'm hurt. I trusted you, I loved you, and you threw that all away for a fling with your boss. How do you think that makes me feel? Her face twisted with rage. You don't understand, you're just jealous, you're afraid of losing control, that's all this is. Jealous, I scoffed. No, what I am is done. Done pretending everything's fine when it's not. You lied to me for years, That's not just a mistake, that's a betrayal I can't forgive." Her voice cracked as she spat. "You're overreacting. You're making everything worse." I stepped closer, feeling the last threads of patience snap. "You are the one making everything worse. I just finally see who you really are, and I refuse to be part of this anymore." That's when I told her I was moving out. Not just temporarily, permanently. I handed her a bag with some clothes, told her to pack her stuff, and left. I didn't want to be there when she started throwing things or begging me to stay. I'd done enough damage, more than enough, and I knew I needed to get myself out of this toxic mess. As I packed my things, I could hear her shouting from the other room, calling me every insult in the book. Honestly, I felt nothing but relief. She was finally revealing her true colors, and I was done pretending I didn't see them. This was the end of the line for us. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I'd taken back my dignity, reclaimed my life, and I knew I wouldn't ever let her pull me into her web again. The betrayal had cut deep, but I was finally healing. The thing I keep asking myself now is, how did I let it get this far? How did I miss all the signs? But more than anything, I realize I won't be the fool anymore. I've learned my lesson. Trust is earned, not given freely to someone who's proven they don't deserve it. Next part. The days that followed felt like a haze. Moving out was a blur of packing, phone calls, and the strange silence that settled over the house I used to call ours. I kept thinking about everything I'd uncovered, how she'd lied for so long, and how much trust I'd lost. It was a hard wake-up call, one I should have seen coming but refused to acknowledge until now. The moment I handed her those keys, something inside me shifted. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. It was like finally breathing after suffocating under a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying. I watched her stand there, clutching her bag, eyes filled with anger and regret. She spat out some final words, but I tuned them out. Nothing she said could undo what had happened. As I closed the door behind me, I noticed her watching through the window, probably realizing she'd finally lost control of everything. That's when I made a conscious decision to let go of the anger that had been eating me alive. I knew I'd need to heal, to rebuild what I'd lost, and to trust again, if only in myself. In the quiet that followed, I started reflecting on what this ordeal had taught me. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who's really in your corner. I learned that no matter how much you love someone, trust is fragile, so fragile that it can shatter in an instant. I also learned that revenge, when done right, isn't about hurting others. It's about reclaiming your dignity and standing up for yourself. I no longer question whether I was naive or blind. Instead, I see that I trusted her because I believed in us. But now I realize that trust has to be earned, and I refuse to let anyone take that from me again. I'm going to be cautious, more aware, and most importantly, I'll never ignore the signs that scream red flag, no matter how much I want to believe the best. Looking back, I see everything in a sharper light, her lies, her betrayal, her desperate attempts to spin her story. But I also see my strength. I didn't crumble. I didn't scream or lash out. Instead, I took control, I made my choice, and I followed through. That's the real lesson. No matter how much someone tries to manipulate or deceive, your integrity is the one thing no one can take away from you. I know I'll be okay. It hurts now, but it's a pain that will fade with time. I'll rebuild my life piece by piece with a clearer mind and a stronger heart. Maybe I'll find someone who truly deserves my trust someday. Maybe I'll just learn to love myself more. Either way, I'm done being the victim of lies. And that's what I want anyone reading this to remember. If you're in a similar situation, listen to your gut. Trust is fragile, but your dignity is. Cut out what doesn't serve you, take control of your life, and never let anyone make you feel small for demanding honesty. Because in the end, the only person responsible for your happiness is you. I walked away from her with my head held high. I closed that chapter knowing I'd done everything I could. And no matter how tough it feels now, I know I'll come out stronger. The key to moving on. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away and never looking back.